current art show, Bhfuil Sinn Féin, Where Are We?, signifies the living history of spaces like St. Dominic's. It reverberates with the church and cultural history surrounding it, but also with the more recent history of its gatherings, plays, lectures, and musical performances in the space now called the Maine Irish Heritage Centre. Many people have long commented that museums of art can resemble churches, sanctuaries, and the audience of art can oftentimes resemble parishioners standing in front of the art as if the art itself were holy. Maine Irish Heritage Centre combines the spaces of the cathedral and the art gallery or art museum in a dynamic show that presents art in the context of Irish American history in the very space that centered that history in Portland, Maine. Bhfuil Sinn Féin is a show of Irish American artists that began as a show ad hoc by Maine College of Art MFA students with the intent of showcasing their work and trying to give voice to Irish American histories in and around Maine and New England. It became, however, something much more. As those histories emerged while the show was taking form, it began to resemble something a bit more significant than a snapshot or a nostalgia for the past. Indeed, it became clear that the show seems to symbolize the pulse of the present, an emerging Irish American identity that is part of a reshaping of New England's cultural map in the 21st century, a reshaping that looks not just to Irish Americans, but to many immigrant traditions in the composite self that is the United States. And so as I curated the show, I began to think about the way in which Irish American history was not unique, ways in which that history stood on its own, but also stood at the crossroads of the American experience. Thus the title Bhfuil Sinn Féin references not just the Irishness in these artists or in these artworks, or the Americanness in these artists or these artworks, but actually in the hybrid combination of both, the intersection of identity and history. So the show combines the alternative modernism of Robin Savage with the traditional realism of Chris Gray to John Quigley's contemporary collagist tendencies to Eliza Ulmer's Oneric landscapes. Together, they resonate labor histories intertwined with pop culture mixed with a little punk audacity and the soulful telling of immigrant histories, all in a space that itself contains the memories of other struggles and stories untold. These works form a series that were intended for the show and all derive their style, I call it Irish jazz, from three modernist Irish painters, Minnie Jellett, Evie Hone, and Mary Swansea. Jellett and Hone were both students of Albert Glaze and are credited with bringing Cubism to Ireland, where it met a rather cool reception initially. Jellett in particular would go on to an early death, but great fame throughout Ireland, and was a particular inspiration for the series. The paintings that resemble stained glass are all conceived as part of mythic histories of 19th century struggle and emigration, famine, coffin ships, up to the Molly Maguires and labor struggles for collective freedom in America. The anthracite coal region mural is part of this history as well and forms the bridge with my own family history in the early 20th century in Pennsylvania. The self-portrait as a dead rabbit is referencing a painting by William Holman Hunt of similar title. It's a portrait of a semi-nude Irish immigrant gang member, the Dead Rabbits, and subtly questions Irish-American racialist stereotypes and masculine roles. My inhabiting of the role is in similar critical attitude. Chris Gray is an oil painter and Ilium Piper from Mount Desert Island, currently living and painting in Portland, and working towards his MFA in painting from Maine College of Art. Chris learned the pipes from Portland's own Tom Rota while studying at Bowdoin. Falling in love with the instrument and its history, Chris traveled to Cork, Ireland, where he earned a degree in traditional Irish music and his MA in ethnomusicology. In 2018, Chris suffered severe nerve damage to both arms, forcing him to take a step back from his music. Painting had always been important to him, but it became much more so with the loss of this music. Painting enabled Chris to reconnect with the Irish community, to friends and family, to the musical community, and to Maine, places that inspire such music and art. Eliza Ulmer was born in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and raised in Spencertown, New York. She received her BFA from SUNY Plattsburgh in 2017. She's currently an MFA candidate at Maine College of Art in her second year. In 2015, Eliza studied landscape painting plein air in Dingle, Ireland. The body of work shown here reflects that special time. Her art practice includes painting, drawing, ceramics, and photography. Her paintings in the show invoke an atmospheric remembrance of not only Dingle, but of an Ireland that exists perhaps in the minds of many Irish Americans in New England. John Quigley completed his MFA from Mecca in 2020. His piece and its rather slapdash fragility and frailty evidence the working conditions in Lowell, in Lawrence, and other mill towns of New England. Dedicated to an optimistic vision of those histories in those towns, Quigley's collage creates the sense of a patchwork remembrance, loosely stitched memories of Irish-American identity in a New England that marginalized the Irish. These are the myths of the Irish and their realities at the same time. All of this can be seen in John's piece, and in the rather delicate nature, the way it hangs from the wall is itself a textile product from those textile mills. And as those mills have been transformed into new uses for new generations, the art hanging here in the former St. Dominic's throughout the sanctuary, and in the spaces haunted by the Stations of the Cross, as well as the labor history show in the recent past, signify our larger collective desire to continue to bring all the histories with us into our current lives and into the future, a future that we fashion from that very history as we reckon and wrestle with it, its lessons, and its cultural endurance. After history in Maine already replete with poverty, negative stereotypes, and an undying devotion to Catholicism evidenced by the steady collection of funds, Portland's Irish immigrant community would at last have a church. On June 13, 1828, on a Friday morning, the foundation stone of what would become St. Dominic's Church was laid on State Street. Thanks in no small part to John Fox, Esquire, who sold the land on State Street to the Catholics when other Protestants refused to. On August 11, 1833, the church was dedicated. By 1846, the congregation had swelled to over 1,000. The number of communicants of the church continued to rise as Irish immigrants escaping famine, disease, and oppression found their way to Portland, Maine, and the solace of St. Dominic's Parish. St. Dominic's survived and continued to grow. It survived the 1850s, when most of Maine was engulfed in anti-Catholic and anti-Irish sentiment. In 1859, the interior was altered and the roof strengthened. The aisles and sanctuary were enlarged, and the church was rededicated on August the 7th. St. Dominic's forged on. The Civil War came, as did the Great Fire of 1866 on July 4th. Although St. Dominic's was little affected, the parish and its mostly Catholic population suffered greatly, as so many homes and small businesses were engulfed by the fire. By the time St. Dominic's closed its doors, it had been a crucial community space for Portland, particularly to the Irish and Catholic of the West End neighborhood. As with any parish church of the 19th and 20th centuries, St. Dominic's hosted every aspect of its parishioners' lives. The closing of the church was announced in 1997, and the Friends of St. Dominic's was formed to try to save their beloved church. The last Mass was said in the lower church on September 29, 1997. St. Dominic's was deconsecrated, but saved. The Friends of St. Dominic's joined forces with the Irish American Club and formed the Maine Irish Heritage Center and began the work of preserving, restoring, and re-energizing this beautiful architectural space for the 21st century in 2003. Like the Irish descendants, like Irish culture, St. Dominic's endures. It stands now ready to serve a new century in a more transformative, open way, while retaining its role as community center and hub for all things Irish in Maine.